So Kubecon's over for another year, buzzing around my head like bees. It was a real hive of activity, and that's where I'll stop with the honey-related analogies. It doesn't really seem to be appropriate in this wonderful place. So what were the big themes? Well, let's get the artificial elephant out of the room first. Yes, OpenAI was built on Kubernetes, which is quite the feat. It wasn't really built for Kubernetes. Wasn't really built for that kind of workload at the outset. So I understand it took quite a few technical jumping through hoops to make that work. But as someone said, we can clearly see that Kubernetes can scale beyond any reasonable doubt, and that does also mean that it's the logical place for your workloads. Yeah, it's a bit slippery, this floor. Beyond and perhaps illustrated by this, the conversations have changed, and I found myself saying, I've had some really great conversations, which always sounds a bit like kind of, well, where wouldn't a conversation be really nice? But it was true. 4 or 5 years ago, Kubernetes was almost tribal. There were the people on the inside that knew what it was all about and were building to all these wonderful CNCF standard things, and the people on the outside were looking at it going, ooh, what's that thing over there? So conversations have very much shifted into what one can call the mainstream. And it's not just Kubernetes, of course. There's all the other stuff that's needed to make it work. All that, the service meshes and the security, container security tools, and the observability stuff. It's all. It was all kind of waiting in the wings, building applications, being important to the people that understood it, and waiting for the mainstream mic to drop. And the surveys we were doing back then, they illustrated the same. If we were talking to enterprise scale organizations, let's call them, sure, there was activity. I think every organization would say they were doing something, but it would be a POC over there, or it would be a skunkworks project that was just emerging as kind of, oh, you've done that, have you? That's really interesting. But it wasn't really what you could call necessarily, we're betting the company on this stuff. Examples of what you might call Kubernetes at scale were the usual poster kids. Google, well, they invented it, so fair enough. And Airbnb, Uber, is that even a thing? And of course, the still nascent back in those days, OpenAI, which is proof, if any was needed, of the aspirational nature that Kubernetes has been and has come from. What a weird place this is. Of course, this my view of Kubernetes through Kubecon glasses has to take into account the pandemic, because everything was very different because of that as well. There was a lot of activity going on, but it just wasn't necessarily visible because the conferences vanished for a while, didn't they? So let's not forget the fact that not only was Kubernetes emerging, but also so were we. Even then, the difference in the last couple of years has been profound. If you go back to just 2022 at Kubecon, you could have argued, and I was feeling, that it was a bunch of highly competent technologies a little bit in search of a problem. From the CNCF perspective, these were well and truly graduated projects outside of the incubation process, battled hardened and ready to go. All that was lacking were people to pick them up and use them for their own application stacks. What a difference a couple of years can make, though, eh? I mean, fast forward to now, and we've gone from solutions in search of a problem to problems needing solving, and not in a bad way. As Paul Hawken once said, the business guru that set up his own online business when online businesses were still a very early thing. There's two kinds of problems in business. There's good problems and there's bad problems. And don't get me wrong, they're both problems. So yeah, all those wonderful pieces of the Kubernetes architecture, we can loosely call it. I mean, I know Kubernetes is the orchestration piece, but all the other elements of the stack that go with it to create these container-based, microservice-based, globally distributed, massively scalable applications that we see today. They're all happening now, which is great, but that's not where the conversations are going. The conversations around those things were already there. Where the conversations are going is from an engineering discussion to more of a business discussion, and that's what's getting really interesting. I mean, there's always a bit of a kind of 1984 style doublethink feeling around times like this, where, you know, all that time you were trying to convince people that this stuff was important, and suddenly they go, yeah, of course it's important. We knew that all along, didn't we? But while that might be true, it doesn't make it any less relevant to what's going on right now. All those conversations around security, oh my goodness, there could be threats. Well, there are. All those conversations around finances, we need to think about this stuff in advance. Well, you do. And the good news is we're learning a little bit from the cloud native world more broadly, in that, I mean, basically FinOps has come along and said, we need to start sorting out costs about all those things we've been building for the past 10 years. Well, that can play straight into what Kubernetes needs now. Yeah, but how much is it going to cost? For vendors, this means conversations are changing. Rather than it being about, oh, look at my shiny thing. Oh, how fast can it run? Oh, I can solve for that particular architectural question that you had. Now the vendor conversations are more about, yeah, but how do you address my business needs? Oh, what are your business needs? I don't know. I'd never thought of asking that before. Which brings to my quick plug to models, patterns, architectures, governance, all that stuff, which is what I've been banging on about for the past 20 years at least. Yeah, let's talk about use cases. Let's talk about scenarios. Let's talk about actually creating stuff in advance of the need rather than building from scratch every time. We're seeing this more in the cloud space now with what's being called industry cloud. So cloud for IoT, cloud for healthcare, cloud for wherever. But we can definitely see the need to see this in the, let's call it again, the Kubernetes space as well. Back to the AI elephant. AI elephant? Yeah, that'll do. That's definitely something organizations should be trying to define themselves. But there's so many pieces missing at the moment. It is very much a custom project. So let's watch that space. And while we do say how this is a time of experimentation for AI, this is also a time for waiting for vendors to come up with solutions as opposed to building blocks. And that's probably my bottom line, and what I will be expecting to see this time next year, which is more and more of a focus on what Kubernetes can do for you in terms of the applications that can be built on top of it, and less about the different pieces that you need in order to have a comprehensive solution. That stuff's still being worked out. There's still stuff to be done around security, around pipeline, around observability, around all these areas that we talk about constantly. But at least that can be a work in progress while starting to deliver on actual things that people need.